Imagine a war fought in secret, not on some distant battlefield, but in the cafes, train stations, and public squares of your own country. For decades, a clandestine network of armies, backed by NATO and the CIA, operated in the shadows of Western Europe. Its official mission was to create a stay-behind force to save democracy from a foreign invasion. But its legacy became entangled with a trail of bombings, assassinations, and political terror that would define an entire era. What if the deadliest terror attacks in a continent's history weren't what they seemed? What if the enemy wasn't some outside force, but a hidden hand manipulating events from within? This isn't a spy thriller. This is the documented and largely admitted story of Operation Gladio and Europe's years of lead. A story that raises disturbing questions about what happens when the guardians of democracy are accused of becoming its greatest threat. Welcome to Sealed Secrets. Tonight, we open the files that governments and intelligence agencies tried to bury. Our story begins in the rubble of post-World War II Europe. The continent was shattered and divided. In the east, the Soviet Union lowered an iron curtain, casting a long shadow of communist expansion. In the west, nations scrambled to rebuild, haunted by the specter of the Red Army. The fear was real. What would happen if Soviet tanks rolled into Italy, France, or West Germany? Would they fall as quickly as the nations in the east? This threat led to the formation of NATO in 1949, a military alliance designed as a shield against Soviet aggression. But behind this public shield, a more secret defense was being forged. Western intelligence agencies, led by the American CIA and the British MI6, looked to the recent past for inspiration. They saw how wartime resistance movements had effectively sabotaged occupying forces, and they decided to build their own in advance. The plan was audacious: create a network of secret armies embedded in nearly every country in Western Europe. These weren't regular soldiers. They were civilians, doctors, farmers, businessmen, recruited for their fierce patriotism and ability to blend in. Their mission was to act as a stay-behind force. If a Soviet invasion happened, they would melt into the population and emerge as a ready-made guerrilla army, waging a war of sabotage from behind enemy lines. Before we continue, I'm aiming for 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If you enjoy deep investigations like this, please subscribe. Now let's continue. In Italy, this secret network was codenamed Gladio, the Latin word for a Roman gladiator's short sword. But Italy wasn't alone. Similar clandestine units existed across the continent: Epsilon in Denmark, ROC in Norway, and P26 in Switzerland, to name a few. These networks were coordinated by a secret committee within NATO, with the CIA and MI6 providing funding, training, and equipment. Recruitment was meticulous. Candidates often needed military experience and unwavering loyalty. They were trained at secret bases, like a facility in Sardinia, learning the dark arts of espionage, sabotage, and guerrilla warfare. To arm this shadow army, huge caches of weapons were hidden across the European countryside. In forests, under old farms, and even beneath churches, caches were stocked with submachine guns, explosives, and mortars, all waiting for a war that hadn't officially begun. On the surface, it seemed like a logical, if extreme, precaution, but a crucial detail in their mandate would prove to be explosive. Documents and testimony later suggested the networks were designed not just to counter a foreign invasion, but also to handle internal subversion. This vague term could be interpreted as a euphemism for the rise of the political left, and it held the potential to twist the mission from national defense into something far more sinister: domestic political control. So what happens when a weapon designed for an external enemy is turned inward? From the late 1960s through the early 1980s, a wave of horrific violence swept across Italy in a period known as the Anni di Piombo, the years of lead. Bombs tore through public squares, banks, and train stations, killing hundreds of innocent people. The political climate was electric with fear. At the time, the blame was publicly pinned on far-left extremists, which fueled calls for a more authoritarian government to restore order. This was the so-called strategy of tension. The alleged goal was to create such a climate of fear that the public might willingly sacrifice democratic freedoms for security. It was a strategy, critics claimed, designed to discredit the political left and prevent the Italian Communist Party, which was gaining democratic support, from ever taking power. For years, the true authors of this terror remained hidden, but decades later, explosive investigations by Italian magistrates like Guido Salvini began to uncover a different story. Salvini concluded that the right-wing neo-fascist groups who planted the bombs, like Ordine Nuovo, were merely foot soldiers. He asserted that these groups were guided and protected by elements within Italy's own secret services, who, in turn, were allegedly linked to the CIA. This remains a deeply controversial claim, as direct proof of CIA operational control over these terrorist acts has not been declassified. The very forces sworn to protect the state were now accused of using terror to manipulate it. A 1990 European Parliament resolution voiced grave concerns, stating that in some countries, military secret services were involved in serious acts of terrorism and crime. In Switzerland, a parliamentary inquiry found its stay-behind army, P-26, had a mandate to activate not just against a Soviet invasion, but also if the left won a democratic majority. The shield was being turned into a sword, pointed at the heart of its own, democracy. For 40 years, Gladio and its sister networks remained one of the best-kept secrets of the Cold War. Then, in 1990, it all came crashing down. The secret was unearthed by an Italian judge, Felice Casson, while investigating an old car bombing. Sifting through dusty files in the archives of Italy's military intelligence, he found the documents that laid out the blueprint for the stay-behind army, detailing its structure and its links to NATO. The discovery was a political earthquake. Under immense pressure, Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti went before the Italian Senate and made a stunning admission. He confirmed that a secret armed organization linked to NATO had existed on Italian soil for decades. At first, he claimed it was dismantled, but later admitted it was still active, officially acknowledging the Shadow Army for the first time. The revelation sent a shockwave across Europe. Newspapers ran explosive headlines about NATO's secret armies. The European Parliament passed a sharp resolution condemning the affair and protesting the lack of democratic oversight. One Italian politician declared, "There will be no future if we do not remove the idea of having lived in a kind of double state, one open and democratic, the other clandestine and reactionary." Parliamentary inquiries were launched in Italy, Belgium, and Switzerland. But in most other countries, governments refused to comment or issued denials. NATO first denied any connection, then stated it doesn't comment on military secrecy. The CIA and MI6 remained silent. The network was officially dismantled, but the masterminds were never held accountable. The official story of Gladio ended there, with a flurry of denials and still classified files. But the questions it raised about the hidden levers of power remain more relevant than ever. This is the kind of history we are committed to uncovering on this channel, the stories that exist in the margins and the shadows. If you believe these stories need to be told, make sure you subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss our next investigation. But now, I want to hear from you. Were these stay-behind armies a necessary evil in the face of a Soviet threat, or were they a betrayal of democratic principles from the very beginning? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The story of Operation Gladio is the story of a ghost army. Born in the fear of the Cold War, it was meant to be a last line of defense. Instead, in some nations, it stood accused of becoming a tool to subvert democracy, linked to a bloody campaign of terror waged against its own citizens. The exposure in 1990 suggested the existence of a deep state that operated beyond the reach of laws and elected governments. It confirmed a secret structure, coordinated through NATO and run by national intelligence agencies, with the potential to manipulate politics through fear. Yet, despite parliamentary inquiries and public outcry, there has been no official apology. No high-ranking NATO or Western government officials were ever brought to justice for the alleged crimes connected to these networks. To this day, many of the most important files on the stay-behind armies remain classified, locked away from public view. The Cold War is over and the Soviet Union is gone. The official justification for these secret armies has vanished. But the story of Gladio forces us to ask a disturbing question. In the shadows of our own democracies, what other secrets are still waiting to be unearthed? This has been a Sealed Secrets. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more forbidden histories and chilling mysteries. Every week, we open the files they never wanted you to see. Because the truth is never where they say it is.